The machine contained inside this black box is going to change the landscape of coin roll hunting and coin collecting as we know it today. Up until this point, coin roll hunting has always been a fully manual task. You open the rolls, examine each coin, and then at your own pace and by your own criteria, determine what you want to throw back and what's worth keeping. Now there's absolutely nothing wrong with coin roll hunting this way, and most hunters would tell you that they wouldn't have it any other way. I myself have happily coin roll hunted this way for almost a decade now. But times have changed, technology advances, and we're now on the precipice of a new age of coin roll hunting. What do you say we take a closer look? Ladies and gentlemen, I present to you the RoboCoin, an automated coin sorting machine. This machine is designed to sort through hundreds or even thousands of coins, separating the valuable and interesting coins from the rest. It does this by automatically scanning each coin, then using AI to identify unique characteristics that might make it more valuable. It's basically doing the same thing that a coin roll hunter does, only in a fully automated and streamlined way. As a software engineer and avid coin roll hunter myself, you can imagine I'm pretty stoked to check out this new technology. Now before we turn the RoboCoin on and start running coins through it, I want to tell you a little bit more about how it came to be in my hands today. This RoboCoin right here is one of only 50 in existence in the world right now. It was designed and assembled in Poland, so it had to travel halfway across the world to get to me here in the United States. The team that made this possible has been working on this machine for a few years now, and it's gone through several iterations to get to this point. They actually sent me a prototype of this machine last year, and I tried to set it up and film a video with it, but couldn't really get it working right. Luckily, they've made some pretty massive improvements to the design and software since that point. And now that we have the official beta version of this machine, I'm excited to run some coins through it and see what it can do. So what kind of coins is this thing able to identify? Well, in its current state, the RoboCoin is only able to identify the 4 main denominations of US coins: pennies, nickels, dimes, and quarters. Within these 4 denominations, the RoboCoin is capable of identifying coins back to the 1910s. I'll throw up the exact cutoff for each denomination on the screen so you can see what it's capable of as of today. For pennies, that covers all the wheat pennies, memorials, and shield backs. For nickels, that's your Buffalo and Jefferson nickels. For dimes, they've got all Mercury and Roosevelt dimes covered. And for quarters, they got Standing Liberty, Washington, and all of the modern designs, including the state quarters, America the Beautiful, and the Women's Series quarters as well. The website currently only lists a few different eras or varieties that can be identified, most of those landing under pennies or quarters. If you're interested in seeing a full list of coins that the RoboCoin is able to identify, I'll put a link down in the description below and you can check it out. Now, I've got 5 tests lined up for the RoboCoin, each more difficult than the last. So what do you say we fire it up, throw some coins in there, and see what this thing is really capable of? Test number 1, differentiating between coins with different designs. Wheat pennies versus modern pennies. All right, we're gonna start off with a simple test. Can the RoboCoin identify wheat pennies and differentiate them from regular pennies? So we got 10 regular pennies, 5 wheat pennies. Let's go ahead and mix them all together. All right, we got them nice and mixed up now. Let's go ahead and drop them into the machine. Hit start and let the machine work its magic. Like we got a wheat penny first. And there we go. Dropped it into the high value bin here, marked by the purple rubber band. We got a memorial penny coming up here. Dropped it into the no value bin over there. All right, that's interesting. Very dirty wheat penny has been dropped into the further verification needed bin. So we got yellow here for further verification needed. Blue would be low value, purple is high value. Alright, looks like right at the end there we ran into a small error. I'm gonna go ahead and release the coins. There was literally just that last coin that needed to be, well, it looks like it was already scanned. It did put it in the correct bin though, so I'm gonna call that scan complete. Let's take a look at the results. So first off, in our reject bin, did we get all 10 memorial cents? Let's see, we got 5 there and 4 over here. So 9 out of 10 did make it into the reject bin successfully. Now taking a look at our needs further identification bin, we got 2 coins in there. And I guess you could say, as expected, these sort of cruddy looking coins here needed further identification. This one obviously very difficult, so I'll give it that. This one sort of same thing. It does end up being a wheat penny, so I I guess this kind of goes to show you the utility of that needs further verification bin. Sometimes you get something that you would keep and sometimes you get something that you wouldn't. So I'd say this is working as intended. Nothing ended up in the low value bin, which is interesting. I think that's probably what was intended. And then our high value bin, of course, did have 4 out of the 5 wheat pennies end up in there. So I would say this first test was definitely a success. 4 out of 5 of the wheat pennies made it where they needed to be. The one that was a little rough looking needed further identification. So pretty much exactly how you would want this to go. Now let's see if it can do the same thing, but with nickels this time.
Buffalo nickels versus regular nickels.
I've got 5 buffalo nickels over here on this side and 10 regular modern Jefferson nickels over here. Let's go ahead and mix them up just like we did with the wheat pennies. All right, I'd say we got them thoroughly mixed. Let's go ahead and drop them in the drum. And once again, hit start. All right, starting off with a Jefferson nickel here. Looks like it was properly identified as no value. Now we have a buffalo nickel coming through the pike. Let's see if it gets this one. Oh, interesting. They put it in there for further identification. Well, at least it didn't trash it, so that's good. All right, all the Jefferson nickels so far have been properly identified. Now this buffalo nickel is a little bit darker. I'm interested to see, oh, it did get that one as high value. So it got that one perfectly right. And here's our final coin right here, final Jefferson nickel. And that one gets dumped. So it looks like we are almost 100% accuracy on this run as well. Let's take a closer look. All right, so here is our reject bin. You can see all Jefferson nickels, 10 of them in there, which puts this at 100% accuracy on identifying the low value nickels. Now we did get 1 coin into our further identification bin here. I don't really know why this one over that super dark one ended up in there. It's clearly a buffalo nickel to the human eye, but I guess to the machine's eye, it wasn't exactly clear, but definitely didn't go into the reject bin, so that's the good thing. And then our high value coins, guys, 4 out of the 5 buffalo nickels did make it into this bin, so I would definitely call that one a success as well.
Mercury dimes versus regular dimes.
All right, we're gonna go ahead and do the same thing with dimes now. We've got 5 silver mercury dimes over here on this side, and we've got 10 regular clad Roosevelt dimes over here on this side. Once again, gonna go ahead and mix them all together. Boy, that sure would be a nice thing to see in a roll of dimes. I've never found one myself, but they are definitely possible. All right, let's see if the RoboCoin can identify the mercury dimes from the regular dimes. Let's go ahead and drop them in the drum and hit start. Oh, we've got a very worn down mercury dime coming up the pike right here. That's the one I'm not sure if it's gonna properly identify, but we'll see. All right, it just finished its scan of that super worn down mercury dime. Let's see what it does. There we go, nice. It did identify it as a mercury dime, threw it into the high value bin. All right, guys, look at that. 15 dimes went in and 15 for 15 were properly identified. So that is the best test so far. You can see in the low value bin here, we have 10 clad dimes. And then in our high value bin here, we got 5 for 5 mercury dimes. So that is a completely successful test. Now moving on to the quarters.
Standing Liberty quarters versus regular quarters.
All right, for this test, I've got 2 Standing Liberty silver quarters, one with a clear date, 1928, and then one that is super worn down. So we'll see what it thinks about that. And then I've got 10 regular clad quarters over here. Of course, we're gonna go ahead and mix these up. And now that we got them properly mixed, we'll go ahead and dump it into the drum and hit start. All right, everything has started out clad so far. It's been dumped into the dump container there. We do have our first Standing Liberty coming through now, and it's actually the very worn out Standing Liberty quarter. So let's see what it does with this one. It just finished its scan. It's sitting right here, and let's see if it identifies it properly. Oh, interesting. It put it into the further evaluation needed bucket, which is, again, that's much better than misidentifying it and putting it in here. We do have our second Standing Liberty quarter right here. This is the one that's in better shape. Let's see if it identifies it as a high value coin. Oh no, that's not good. It looks like the RoboCoin just made its first grave error. It put a Standing Liberty silver quarter into the dump box. That is not what you want to see. All right, and that scan is now complete. We'll go ahead and hit stop and take a look at the results. So over here in our dump bin, guys, we do have all of the clad quarters in here, which is a good sign. Unfortunately, we also have one of the Standing Liberty silver quarters that did make its way into the dump box. That is not what you want to see. On the bright side, we did also get one of the Standing Liberty quarters into the further evaluation needed. I'm really curious what made the machine think that this one needed further evaluation, but the other Standing Liberty quarter didn't, even though it's in better shape. So obviously still some bugs to work out here when identifying Standing Liberty silver quarters from regular clad quarters. So that concludes test number 1. Now moving on to test number 2.
Test number 2, finding precious metals. Silver dimes versus non-silver dimes.
For this first part of test number 2, we're gonna see how good the RoboCoin is at identifying silver Roosevelt dimes versus regular clad Roosevelt dimes. As always, go ahead and mix them up. And once we feel like they're nice and mixed, go ahead and dump them into the drum and press start. So for this first test, we should expect 5 silver Roosevelt coins in this purple high value bin, and then 10 non-silver clad Roosevelt dimes over here in the reject bin. All right, looks like we've identified our first high value coin. We'll see if that's right or not. It's a little bit difficult from the naked eye to be able to tell if you have a silver Roosevelt dime or not. It takes a little further inspection. Uh-oh. I think that was a silver dime that just went into the reject bin. Alright guys, that is the end of the scan. This one, like I said, much more difficult than the previous scans, and it's definitely showing in the results. First, let's take a look at the reject bin. Alright, yeah, I'm definitely seeing some silver in there, which is unfortunate, but let's see how many. Alright, here's the dimes that ended up in the reject bin, and if you've been watching the channel for a while, you can probably see at least 2 silver right off the bat. So this one right here, of course, that's going to be silver. Looks like the year on that one's 1948, so that one would have been missed. And we got another silver right here, that one being in 1962, and then I think we got one more. This one's a little trickier to see, but I believe it's right here. Yep, 1952 right there. So it did end up missing a few silvers, so once again, a few bugs to work out for sure. Of course, remember, it is still in the beta phase and it has a lot of improvements to go. It will improve, but this is where we're at right now. Let's take a look at which one it identified for further verification. All right, so this single coin, it wanted us to take another look at. I'm guessing it's because of all of that corrosion there on the backside. It probably wasn't able to identify exactly what I was looking at, but of course, to the naked eye, or to the human eye, I should say, this is clearly something you would throw back. And then it did positively ID 2 silver dimes as high value. Let's take a look at what kind of separates these from the others. Right, so I'm guessing it's because these are in much better shape, easier to read the date for sure. Both of these ended up being 1964, which is interesting. I guess on the bright side, most of the silver dimes you find do end up being that date because it is a super common date for the silver dimes. They made a ton of them that year. So yeah, 2 for 5, not too great on the dimes. We do have some quarters to take a look at. Let's see if it can do better there.
Silver quarters versus non-silver quarters.
So here we go. We got 2 silver Washington quarters. This one's going to be difficult. You can see that one has some issues. I'm guessing that'll go in the yellow. I really hope it doesn't go into red. And then we've got 10 regular clad Washington quarters once again with state quarters and everything else mixed in there as well. So we'll mix these up real quick. All right, I think those are properly mixed. Dump them into the drum and hit start. All right, everything's been positively ID'd so far. Here comes our first silver quarter. It's getting scanned currently, and the scan just completed. Let's see where it goes. All right, there we go. It was able to identify that 1956 silver quarter. And right here we have our super worn down silver quarter, 1956, I believe. Just got dropped into the scanner. Let's see what it thinks. Oh, interesting. So it just put a Kansas quarter into the low value bucket, and here comes the silver quarter. Let's see what it does. Oh yeah, that's what I figured. So that one is going to be needed to look at for further verification. That's okay with me. I actually like that decision. All right, the rest of this is just clad, so it should just go straight through to the dump area. And it looks like that is it. Okay, so this was the first scan where we actually got a coin in at least one of each of the buckets here. Let's take a look at the results. So starting off with our dump bucket here, we got 9 out of 10 clad quarters into there, positively identified. Then for our further verification bucket, as sort of predicted, we did end up with that 1952 quarter. So that's really good that at least this coin did not end up in the dump bucket. I'm really happy to see that. Definitely looking at this again, you would notice, even though you can't really tell from the edge, if you look at the date, it's a 1952, so we know that to be silver. Now, our first coin into the low value bucket. Let's take a look at that. So it appears to be a Kansas quarter, and I know right off the bat why this one was put into low value. It's not necessarily that it has value yet. You do need to find an error on it, and of course that's going to be the "In God We Rust" error over on the back side of the coin, or I should say the obverse. I'll put a picture up of what you would want to look for on that "In God We Rust" Kansas quarter. We don't have it on this one, so really I would think this should actually go into the further inspection bucket personally, because this is something you would want to look at a little closer. Just because it is a Kansas quarter, that doesn't necessarily mean that it's going to have any value. It needs to have that error on it as well, and this one does not. So this is something I would throw back after taking another look. And finally, our high value bucket did properly identify one of 2 of the silver quarters. It's going to be that 1956. Of course, this is a keeper, guys. I mean, clearly, this is a nice old silver, 90% silver, 56 quarter. So I'm glad that it got that. So that's going to do it for test number 2. Moving on to test number 3 now.
Test number 3, modern rarities. 2009 pennies versus regular pennies.
So now we're in the realm of modern rarities. We want to see if the RoboCoin can differentiate these 2009 pennies from these regular Lincoln pennies over here. So as always, we'll mix them up together. Now that it's properly mixed, dump it into the drum and click start. We've got 5 2009 pennies versus 10 regular pennies. Let's see how it does. All right, our first 2009 penny just went through and it got dumped into the low value bin. I believe that is the expected behavior. As long as they don't end up over in this dump bin, I will be happy. All right, that's interesting. We just had one go into the further verification bin. We'll have to see what that one is a little later. And another one there. So it looks like it's pretty good at identifying 2009 so far. And that is the end of that scan. Let's take a look at the results. This is interesting. Starting off with the dump coins. We've got 7 out of 10 coins properly identified as unneeded dump coins right here. So that's good. What about this? We got 2 that need further verification. Now, what are these going to be? All right, so it looks like we got a 1966, which has some corrosion on it. And then we have a 2009 Denver. So one of the coins that we wanted to see. Oh yeah, that makes sense. This one's got some gunk on it, so I can see why it went into that bin. So obviously I would just look at this bin, find the 2009 and pull it out, and then probably throw back this 1966. So I'm not too mad at that. And then of course that only leaves us with 4 more coins, all of them being properly identified 2009 pennies. And these all fell into the quote-unquote low value bin, which is fine. That's sort of, I mean, I would show these as lower value than, say, a wheat penny. So I think that makes sense. So this was a good scan. I'm actually very surprised it was able to do that so well. All right, so at this point, it looks like there's some sort of jam going on here. I'm gonna try to unstick it manually. Oh, there we go. Okay, we got that solved. And it's not letting me hit stop for some reason. So let me just turn it off and back on. All right, here we go. Power cycling the RoboCoin. I did not notice there were those 2 coins sort of jammed in there for whatever reason. I mean, at least they didn't end up being 2009s, but we're gonna go ahead and call that scan done. We'll let it boot back up here and get on to the next one.
2009 nickels versus regular nickels.
All right, we got our going again. Let's try the same thing now with nickels. We have 2 2009 nickels right here versus just 10 regular nickels. These are different than the 10 regular nickels we tried in the first test. Of course, as always, we're gonna go ahead and mix these up. Let's see how the RoboCoin does at identifying those. Whoops, throw that in and hit start. All right, it's hard to tell from here, but everything so far has gone into the reject bin, which is making me a little nervous for this scan. All right, guys, that is the end of the scan. It looks like everything went into the reject bin, so it may be the case that by default, RoboCoin does not recognize 2009 nickels as an interesting coin to look out for. Now, I know that you can change that in the settings on your RoboCoin machine, so let me try to do that real quick and see if that is gonna make a difference, and we'll retry this scan. All right, guys, I did confirm that the 2009 Jefferson nickel wasn't being looked for. I added it as a rule through the app and I restarted the machine, but for some reason, no matter what I did, I couldn't get it to put that actually into the high value bin. It keeps putting them in the garbage bin. So I'm gonna send that over to them, see if I can figure out why that is, but theoretically you should be able to add your own rules, for example, to look for those 2009 nickels instead of just looking for those 2009 pennies like it was able to identify. I would say these 2009 nickels by default should go into the high value bin right there. And that's the rule I tried to add, but it just wouldn't take for whatever reason. So we're gonna go ahead and move on to the next test.
A business strike San Francisco quarter versus regular quarters.
So for our final part of the modern rarities test, we're going to see if the RoboCoin can differentiate between a 2017 San Francisco business strike quarter versus 10 regular quarters. Now this one is not something that should be in circulation. These were distributed to collectors who purchased them, and then somehow they do end up into circulation. It's always good to look out for those San Franciscos. I'm sure I've missed them in the past. And this is actually one of the biggest use cases that I can think of for the RoboCoin, is to find stuff like this. This is one of many use cases, but one that I would definitely find useful because I'm sure I don't check every single mint mark on these coins. So I probably am missing these from time to time. I did find this one though, and I'm gonna see if the RoboCoin can find it as well. So let's mix it in here with 10 regular quarters and see if it can do it. All right, I just kind of threw it into the stack here, somewhere in the middle. So go ahead and dump it into the drum and hit start and see how it does. This is our San Francisco business strike right here, up next for the scan. And there it goes, it just dropped into the scanner. Let's see if it can pick it up. All right, here's our coin. Let's see where it drops. Yeah, there we go. So it did identify it as a high value coin. That's what we wanted to see. All right, and that's the end of that scan. That one actually went perfectly. Looks like we have all 10 regular quarters over here in the dump bin, and then our singular San Francisco business strike quarter right there in the high value bin. So that is a successful test.
Test number 4, old coins, rare versus common. Rare versus common wheat pennies.
All right, moving on to test number 4, we're gonna be looking at some rare versus common older coins. So the difference in these tests here, all of these coins should make it into at least one of these 3 bins here. None of them should go into the dump bin. The difference is that some of them should show up as low value, like these wheat pennies, and then others should show up as high value, or at least that's what I would suspect. Maybe I need to edit the rules once again to do that. I like to look at it like this. If it's pre-1940s, that is a higher value wheat penny in most cases. So we have a bunch of pre-1940s pennies over here. You can see 1918, 1919. I even threw in this steel penny as sort of a wild card just to see how it handles this by default. This is 1943, so not pre-40s, but a lot of people like these. They are very interesting. The only year to be steel like this. And then we got a couple more pre-40s wheat pennies over here. And then on the other side, we just have our common 50s and 40s wheat pennies. So nothing crazy right there. Let's see if it ends up differentiating between them or if it just kind of throws them all into the same category. All right, I got them all mixed up. So 5 and 5, dump them into the drum and hit start. All right, we got a high value find right there. And you know, going back to the first test now, I'm starting to think maybe all of these wheat pennies are just going to be identified as high value, which wouldn't be the worst thing in the world. It's just that some wheat pennies are higher value than others. And there goes the steel cent into the high value category as well. So I guess at this point, we're just kind of hoping that everything falls into that high value and nothing gets into this dump box right here. Wow, interesting. So that is the final coin. Let's go ahead and stop the scan there. 9 out of 10 went into this high value box right here. And then the very last coin ended up over here in the needs further inspection. I have no clue why, but let's take a look. All right, so here's the odd one out. Really no clue on this one because it actually looks like it's in decent shape. Like, I don't see any reason why the machine would have a hard time with this one. 1953 Denver is the year. Just pretty standard wheat penny right there, so maybe that one's just a fluke, I don't know. The rest of the wheat pennies did fall into that high value category, so as I suspected, it doesn't seem to know how to differentiate between what I would consider a high value wheat penny versus a more common or low value wheat penny. It just kind of puts everything in the high value right now. Of course, once again, that is something you can change in the settings. I'm just using the default settings right now, and I still haven't figured out exactly how to get those settings to take effect, but I do know that theoretically it should be possible to change those settings if you want to.
Rare versus common pre-60s Jefferson nickels.
All right, let's try the same thing with Jefferson nickels. Right here I've got 5, a little bit lower mintage. Some of them I believe are in the key date range, at least how we define it. So these are a little tougher to come by, and of course some of them depend on the mint mark on the backside. You can see this one has a Denver mint mark. I'm curious to see if the RoboCoin is able to identify that mint mark because it is so small. I got to imagine that's sort of difficult. And then we just have some more common ones over here, 1940, 41. No mint mark on most of these. So let's see if it's able to differentiate between them, or at least, hopefully not to put any of these into the dump bin over here. So properly mixed up. Let's go ahead and dump them in here and hit start. Interesting. So our very first Jefferson nickel just went into the dump area. And it looks like we have another one. I think it's possible the default settings don't care about pre-60s Jefferson nickels, which in my opinion is completely wrong, guys. We look for pre-60s Jefferson nickels. That is one of my... Oh wait, we got a high value one there. That's interesting. We'll have to take a look at why that is. Another high value right there as well. So maybe it is maybe it's looking at mintage. I don't know. I guess we'll have to see. All right, another one into the dump area over there. That is so interesting. So why would it put some at high value and then the others at dump? Another high value there. And I think we have one more to go. Yep, one more nickel here. Let's see what it does. And that one is dump. So 6 into the dump, 4 into high value. Let's go ahead and stop the scanner now. Let's take a look at what it put here in the dump area. All right, this is very interesting. So it positively identified the 5 pre-60s, somewhat, as you would say, quote unquote, common pre-60s Jefferson nickels, and it dumped those. I would not have chosen that. I would have put these in low value for sure. And then it also accidentally grouped in a 1938 into that pile. So this was definitely a misidentification. It should have put this into the high value, or at least the yellow bin for further inspection, but I wasn't able to do that for whatever reason. I'm sort of boggled on how it made this classification, but it did get 4 of the 5 what I would refer to as lower mintage Jefferson nickels into the correct bin. So it positively ID'd these 4, it missed the 1938, and then I think it just sort of misclassified the other ones, at least in my opinion. I would have put them in the blue low value bin, but it's definitely doing something. You can see that it's getting this differentiation on the nickels at least. It wasn't able to do that on the pennies at all, as it just put all wheat pennies into the high value category. So interesting. I would say if you start with these default settings, you're definitely gonna have to change stuff, especially if you go by my philosophy on what I like to keep, what I would consider low value versus high value, and so on. So takeaways on test number 4. I do like that it is identifying all wheat pennies as something to keep. It seems to be really good at that. I do like that it's differentiating. It's making a differentiation between different types of older Jefferson nickels. However, by default, it does not keep the older Jeffersons that are considered more common, like, you know, later 50s, anything without, a lot of things without mint marks. It's throwing those into the dump box, which I wouldn't do. It is almost always picking out the more rare ones and putting those into high value, so that's good.
And finally, test number 5, errors and varieties. The Alaska Extra Claw Quarter, the Kansas In God We Rust Quarter, the Delaware Spitting Horse Quarter. So moving on to our final test for the RoboCoin today, I anticipate that this is going to be the most difficult test, and the reason for that is because it needs to identify super minute details
to look and see if we have any errors or varieties. So bringing back that Kansas quarter that we mentioned a little bit earlier, I guess that was kind of like foreshadowing. We actually have a legitimate In God We Rust error, as you can see right here. So this is a real In God We Rust coin that I found coin roll hunting. It is a legitimate error or variety there. And then we have a couple others here. This one's a little bit easier to find, the Alaska Extra Claw. I'll go ahead and throw up a picture of what that looks like so you guys can see kind of what to look out for. This is a pretty extreme example of that extra claw there. So another one that I want to see if RoboCoin's able to identify. And then in addition to that, we have our Delaware Spitting Horse quarter. This one I actually found very recently in a video, so I'm excited to put it through the machine and see if it's able to identify it. Another very interesting error and variety here. I'll put up a picture of what you're looking for on that one as well, just so you guys can see if you're unaware. So I'm going to take these 3 coins, mix them in with a whopping 20 regular nickels, and see what the RoboCoin is able to do with it. All right, just sort of randomly distributed them into the pile here. Let's go ahead and dump them into the drum, hit start, and see what it can do for this final test. All right, we got one into the low value bin here. We'll have to see what that is a little later. All right, we've got our spitting horse lined up right here. Just dropped into the scanner. Scan just completed. We got it dropped down right here. Let's see if it gets that. Yes, it does put it into the low value. Now, I don't know if that's just because it is a Delaware quarter or if it's because it identified the spitting horse. I'm guessing it's probably just because it's a Delaware quarter. It would probably put any Delaware quarter there, which isn't the worst thing in the world. If you think about it, you would probably want to inspect every Delaware quarter to see if it's what you're looking for. And there we go. It looks like we just got our final error coin into the bin. It looks like this is going absolutely perfectly. Oh, wait a minute. Huh. We just had a 4th one drop in there. I wonder if we had an extra Alaska quarter in there. We'll have to take a look. I believe that is the end of the scan. So let's take a look and see what we got here in our dump bin. So yeah, just looking through here, I don't see anything that I personally would have kept. So I think it did a good job on identifying the dump coins. Now let's take a look at what it identified as low value coins. So this is odd, right? We must have gotten an extra coin in here that we weren't expecting. So there's our Alaska, and then there's our Kansas and God We Rust, our Delaware, of course, and let's see what the extra coin is that it identified. Arizona. Why would it identify an Arizona? Is there an error or variety to look for on the Arizona coins? There must be. I'm not familiar with it though, so we'll have to take a look and see. All right, so apparently there is something called the Arizona Extra Cactus Leaf error, which I have never heard of before, but they have it in there as a default coin to put into the low value bin. So that's interesting. I just learned something from a machine. Can you believe that? All right, that's cool. Well, I think I might have to start looking for that, especially because I just visited the Grand Canyon for the very first time over in Arizona. It was a wonderful trip, a very, very cool sight to see. If you're ever in the area, I definitely would recommend it going over there because it is absolutely amazing. But that is cool, guys. We learned something new about a new error and variety to be on the lookout for. That's very cool. So guys, that's interesting. Even though I thought this was going to be one of the hardest tests, it turns out it was actually the easiest for the RoboCoin. It was able to positively ID these 3 coins like we were looking for, and then even another one that we didn't know about. So that is really cool. Now, I think the caveat on that is that I don't think it knows for sure that it has the error. It just knows it's a Kansas, so you should look for it. Same thing with the Delaware. It knows it's a Delaware, so you should look for the spitting horse. But still, it's nice that it puts those to the side so that you can actually take a look at those a little bit later. Like basically what I would do is just run a bunch of quarters through this, have it spit out all of these, and then just put them under the scope and see if it has the errors I'm looking for. So that concludes my first beta test of the very first ever coin sorting machine, aka the RoboCoin. Now for the feedback. My biggest issue by far with the RoboCoin at this point is its failure to identify silver Roosevelt dimes from clad ones. While it was able to differentiate mercury dimes from regular clad dimes perfectly, the silver dimes gave it a huge issue, and that is actually going to be a big portion of your coin roll hunting dimes, right? You're probably not going to be finding many mercury dimes. The vast majority of silver dimes that you're finding, if you're finding any at all, are going to be Roosevelt. So you need this machine to be able to identify those. My next big issue is mainly just the fact that certain defaults that I would think are no-brainers were not there. For example, 2009 nickels and 2009 dimes should definitely be default as either low or high value. I would put them at high value, but at least low value on those 2009 dimes and nickels. I was happy to see that the pennies were already in there, but we got to get the nickels and dimes in there as well. So I had to try to put those in myself, and for whatever reason I wasn't able to do it. I did see that the machine was identifying the 2009s perfectly, like it was saying that's a 2009 nickel, but then it was just throwing it into the reject slot, which in my opinion it shouldn't do by default. Along those same lines, I personally believe that all Jefferson nickels under 1960 should at least go into the low value bin. They should not be going into the reject bin. Now I know this one's probably going to be up for debate. A lot of people don't like to keep the older Jefferson nickels if they're just more common. A lot of people ask me, why is your cutoff 1960? It seems arbitrary. Easy for me. I like to see that 5 in front, and I think that just goes back to childhood. I always like to see that. So even if they are a little bit more common, I think they're worth keeping. Other people's, like I said, will disagree with me on that, so maybe this is a more of a minor thing, but I would like to see that in there by default. Pre-1960s nickels should go into at least the low value bin. There was also that issue where for some reason it doesn't seem to be very good at identifying standing Liberty quarters. Maybe they haven't tested with a whole lot of those, so it's hard to do that. But they're clearly a very different design. You should not, under any circumstances, be throwing those into the reject bin. I mean, come on, it's a standing Liberty quarter. That's definitely not going to be a reject by any means. Now some things that I really liked. One of the really cool things that I see in the RoboCoin is the fact that it's able to identify different heirs and varieties in the quarters, because there are so many of them. It was really cool to see that it pulled out that Arizona quarter, which I didn't even know about, and then I was able to learn something new, and then I could go back and look for that heir or variety on that coin. I thought that was extremely cool. I also like the fact that they're pulling out Business Strike San Francisco coins from the quarters by default. That would be very, very helpful for me. Like I said, I don't always check every single coin's mint mark, so I'm sure that I have missed some of those San Francisco Business Strike coins in the past. This would make sure that I never miss them again. And the other positive is that despite the fact that there are still flaws in this machine, I have seen these guys work at it for a long time, and I know they're going to continue working on it and improving it in the future, so it's only going to get better from here. So I'm very excited about that. So there you have it, guys. That's my first look and my feedback on the very first coin sorting machine that we've ever seen, aka the RoboCoin. I know this is very brand new, it's very interesting to see, and it's early in its development stages, so I'm sure there's going to be a lot of conversation down in the comments below. Let me know what you think about this, if this is going to help you out, if you would be interested in this machine for yourself. I'd love to hear about it. So go ahead and put your thoughts down in the comments below. I'm gonna be very interested to see what you guys have to say. But anyways, guys, that's gonna pretty much do it for this one. Thank you so much for watching. Make sure to go down below and leave a like if you enjoyed. Subscribe if you're new, because I post new videos like this as often as I can. And as always, I'm Quinn, and this is Quin's Coins signing out, and I will see you in the next one.